Started then. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We're here with Alex Melendez, who's in admissions, works in admissions there at NSU Law, and we have Miss Yvonne, who's going to be discussing with you guys today about LSAC and NSU Law. You guys can go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, awesome. And guys, thank you so much for joining. I know it's a smaller group here. I know it's kind of right around probably in between classes or lunchtime. So we appreciate you joining. And really what the goal for today is myself and Miss Yvonne as part of NSU Law Admissions. One of kind of the key pieces for the process is your CAS report. And so with that, I think what we see a lot of times is students go through the application process and either maybe haven't taken time to go through the CAS report, or they might see it and just really don't know where to navigate or kind of understand how us within admissions will really navigate that report. And so that's going to be the goal today, is really kind of walking through a few examples, pulling up an example of a CAS report, and walking through, hey, this is maybe within the admissions piece where we're looking for in terms of specific information. So with that, I'll start sharing my screen. Really the point of today is, one, a better understanding of NSU Law, where we stand in terms of not only Florida, but also some of our nationally ranked programs. So a high-level overview of our program, and then ultimately diving in to the CAS report for our time. And so with it, I'll go ahead, I'll share my screen here, and we should be going for our time. And if I can get maybe just like a thumbs up to make sure everyone can see my screen. And there's awesome. Thank you. Perfect. So in terms of, again, kind of a high-level overview on a few things, just walking through NSU Law, we're here in Florida, one of the premier schools we are thinking of going and kind of pursuing a degree in law. One of those programs within the state of Florida, but again, nationally ranked with several of our programs. And then we'll really dive into our CAS report. And so with that, really starting at the cover page, so understanding really what we're looking for when we see that cover page, breaking some of those pieces down. And then from there, we'll go ahead into the writer's prompt. Within that writing prompt, a few different ways, but also some really key areas that Miss Yvonne is going to walk through, and kind of what are we considering, what are we looking for, and things to remember. And then ultimately, going in through some more kind of detailed pieces of when we're looking at the CAS report, a lot of times students may overlook whether it's an academic warning or academic probation. And so really going into detail of what we're considering, what we're looking for, and how you might be able to, again, streamline that process of not only reviewing your own CAS report, but also through the application process. In terms of some information that we do have here, so again, a high-level overview of NSU, but a few different call-outs that I do want to point out for us. In terms of, again, being one of the premier law schools within the state of Florida, some of our national rankings as well, we do have there for the top. When we think of Florida, currently ranked number 1 when we think of our health law concentration. So if that is an area that you're potentially looking to pursue, health law is one of those premier programs for NSU. Thinking through our legal research and writing, we do have also a little bit there on the bottom for it, but currently ranked number 2 in Florida and 11th nationally within our legal research and writing. One of the things that we pride ourselves in as a private institution, definitely smaller class sizes. And so when we do think of our legal research and writing program, right around 20 to 25 students on average within those class sizes, really making sure that you're understanding, you're grasping, but then also one of the things that we pride ourselves on is kind of that student to faculty ratio. And so within some of those programs, you will see a little bit smaller in class sizes. And then trial and advocacy, some of you may have done either trial advocacy or even mock trial in high school and now even in undergrad. And then what does that look like to continue to pursue some of those extracurriculars? Currently, our trial advocacy program is ranked nationally, and that is something that we pride ourselves in. On campus here within the College of Law, we have 2 courtrooms within the building that our students do facilitate a lot of those practices and competitions. Just this past week, we had a competition here as well. When we think of that College of Law buildings, we have that here, a one-stop shop. The way that we utilize the building and really kind of the intentionality of everything is you have your library, your support staff, your faculty. Everyone is within a single building here at the College of Law to make sure it is as efficient for you as possible. And in terms of some of the programs that we do have, so we do have that JD program offering that full-time and part-time. The reality is, coming out of undergrad, some of you will have opportunities to go into the workforce, or just some of the realities financially will be an obligation to go into the workforce, and so we do offer that part-time program as well. In terms of just some general information and some ideas in terms of I'm interested in NSU and what could that look like to apply. Looking across here, just a few things to call out for us. When we think of our GPA, so the incoming class profile for 2025, we did have students within that range of 3.34 all the way through that 371, and those are going to be within our 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles. And then when we do have here as well as the LSAT scores, currently kind of that 50th median percentile, right around 155. I'm telling students as we are going through kind of the recruiting process and looking ahead to that 2026 and even beyond 2027 cycle, we're seeing that these numbers are going to go up. We continue to be not only competitive within the state of Florida, but nationally we are seeing that competitive piece with our applicants. And so the reality is we're seeing these numbers here. This is for 2025, but when we think of coming into that new cycle, we do anticipate those numbers to increase. In terms of now kind of stepping into the CAS report and really kind of the bulk of our time today, I'm going to stop sharing really quick and kind of transition screens. But with the idea of starting to review the CAS report, a few things come to mind. For us within admissions, it is going to be a tool that we are utilizing when we are reviewing your application. And so with that, when I say tool, is that it really allows us to go through different areas of your academic history, as well as then pairing it to your application, really kind of a tool that not only we'll utilize, but ultimately the review committee will utilize as well. And I do want to confirm, just one more thumbs up. Are we seeing just a screen? It should have a CAS report. Awesome. Well, perfect. Let's get into it. I know there's a lot to look at on the screen, but certainly kind of a few things to point out for us here. The first, and we'll kind of walk through in terms of the screen, we're looking at the report left to right, and we'll kind of go through down. But the first piece I always like to call out here is immediately the first thing that we're looking at is going to be within some of this area here. We do get to see that political science undergraduate major. So with that, your major will be listed on there. And then for us, it is a indicator of then we can go through the transcript and understand not only some of the credits that you've been taking, but some of the rigor of the specific major and courses of curriculum. From there, just the reality too is some students will go ahead and assume certain information we do receive. Within this here, a lot of that information we do not know unless the student will go ahead and disclose that. And so with it on the screen here, some of that will be pulled. Some of the information has been removed just for the privacy of the student. But a lot of things that a student would typically think, hey, they'll have this, we do not have unless it is disclosed by the student. If we are then moving to the right-hand side, right here we have all the listed institutions that the student did attend. With that, a few things to call out for us here. From our end, what we are looking at, we do have those institutions listed. But we do see the BA, so we're understanding that this student did go ahead and pursue their bachelor's within 3 institutions. But then they also did pursue their master's. And so we do see in terms of the level undergrad, and then we'll see graduate, that BA for bachelor's and master's right there. For us, as I'm looking through this for an applicant, a few also things that I would call out here. I can see that the student is still graduating within the 2026, so they're currently pursuing their master's. For us, NSU does require an application that is still enrolled to go ahead and submit at least one of their letters of recommendation be from an academic source, like a professor. And so with that here, if it's been over 12 months, then with that, simply 2 from either an employer or a mentor can go ahead and suffice. But since they are still enrolled, we will require then that academic letter of recommendation. From here, A few things that we'll continue to look at. The notes from the transcript. So this will go ahead and we'll review a few examples here as well. The first piece that we do see is it is going to indicate in terms of any academic honors, credits, and then also the year. So we'll be able to see anything that is potential from the transcript. We'll have that called out here. We'll go through a different example in terms of if a student does have any academic warning, probation, or even further action, that will be indicated in that area as well. From here, kind of the next step of really kind of the main tool that we do see and that we do use is really transitioning to the transcript analysis part. And so from here, the transcript analysis, it is going to show us a few different things. So one, it will go ahead and just kind of list out those institutions that the student attended, but then we'll also see in terms of that overall GPA. So we can see, and really when we start thinking of maybe a cumulative GPA, when you are applying to law school, we are taking a look at your undergraduate GPA. And so from there, we get to really see a few things here from the student. And then typically for us, if you were to kind of plot dots on a graph, we can typically see some type of narrative, right? So the student for here, for example, we can see they maybe started off not the strongest, but we do see that increase as the semesters go along and as the years go along for that student. For us indicating, hey, the reality is as a freshman, as 18, 19, sometimes school might not be that priority, but we do see the increase when we see that student kind of slowly continue to move in that upward trend there. From here, a few things that we also will consider when we think of the application process. Of course, we are considering a holistic review, but we're also considering the piece of a comparative. How are you comparing to students from your institution that are applying for law school? How are we comparing you to students that are taking the LSAT for that year? And then ultimately, how are we comparing and how are you comparing to students within our current applicant pool? And some of the tools that we do utilize for that will be within this transcript analysis. And so we do see from this transcript analysis, we can actually take a closer look and saying from the University of Miami, from those that sat to take the LSAT, that 156 was that mean for the LSAT. How is this student comparing to students from their institution? And so with that, again, the process starts in terms of the comparative piece, the review piece, within the academic history for our students. So really from here, again, using a lot of that language that we already have on here to start that process. Part of that continuation too is taking a closer look at those grades earned. Again, kind of if we were to plot some dots on a graph for the student, when we think of the GPA, we can see that it does go ahead and increase. But we're also able to see in terms of the total amount of A's, B's, C's, potentially D's and F's that the student did have. And so with it again, indicating here within the different semesters that the student enrolled, where we might see some of those grades. And again, for us, continuously, it is the review process of, one, a lot of the students are applying GPA and LSAT, that is the eye candy, but the reality is a lot of students that are applying have really good GPAs and eye candy when we think of those parts of the application. And so for it, how are we seeing and taking a closer look into, again, some of the rigor of the curriculum and potential of the major as well for the student. Before I move on kind of from this section, I know it's a lot there. Yvonne, did you have anything to add for the students? I wanted to go ahead and give that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. First of all, even though in that upper right-hand box lists the school or schools that you attended, it's the bachelor's, the first bachelor's degree. Some people might have dual degrees. Some might have completed a bachelor's, didn't do that well, and decided to go back and do another one. It's the first bachelor's degree that is going to be parsed out in the CAS report. A master's degree is not parsed out on a CAS report, even though it's listed. So it gives the reviewer, as Alex had said, an idea that the person has continued on with their education and will be graduating towards the end of the calendar year, right? So the degree granting school is the school that's going to be analyzed. And that's why in that last column where it says 2424 under the transcript analysis, University of Miami, the LSAT college mean is the average LSAT score of test takers from Miami. Now we go to the bottom left-hand box, which has the person is a multiple LSAT test taker. And we don't generally want you to become a multiple LSAT test taker. It's not like the SAT or the ACT that you can take numerous times and publish your highest scores. We kind of frown against that, but this person continued. And as we said, 156 is the LSAT college, it's the college from which you're graduating, mean average. 156, we see that this candidate, when they took their LSAT the first time, and Alex is going to talk about what that P means in a moment. The scores are 155, June of 2024, which is below Miami, but they took it again and they scored a 159 above Miami's mean, a 157 above Miami's mean, and a 159 above Miami's mean. I know if I had scored a 159, I would have stopped taking exams, right? When we retake them, you can score higher, as this candidate did, but sometimes you can score the same, and guess what? You can score lower. So that's the risk that you take when you retake an exam. And also the other thing that I would look at as a seasoned reader, I've been doing this 32 years. I've worked out of 5 different law schools, and the trends might change from cycle to cycle, but basically certain things stay the same. Here, I would question, why take the exam so many times? Sometimes that is not to your advantage. I believe the person took it this many times to increase their scholarship opportunity. But sometimes a 159, a 157 might also bear the same scholarship amount. So you're doing this and you're wasting a lot of money and time to do a scholarship increase. So just be conscious. The more exams you take, it might not be to your benefit. It benefits you if you you practice the exam under test conditions multiple times, but aim to take the actual exam no more than 2 times if you can help it. So that's one of the things. And then the administration dates, they're so close together. And by the way, the person has taken it 5 times. They cannot take the exam again, probably for another year, and they have 2 more lifetime opportunities. 7 times is it. And you cannot take the LSAT after that ever unless they change those rules. So I would rather that the person, instead of taking it 5 times, would have practiced it multiple times and then be intentional on when they're going to take the exam. For those of you, as you all who are here present, are still in school, you also run the risk, if you're preparing your LSAT, you might not be preparing your undergraduate courses. And so your GPA might take a dip, and that's not a good thing. As Alex mentioned, the upward trend, the GPA increased at each grading period. That's a good thing. But if it drops, we know life happens, but you pick yourself up so that you can end your career at the University of Miami or wherever with your strongest GPA. So those are the things that I have to say about that. And Alex is going to tell you about that P.
No, perfect. Thanks, Ms. Yvonne. Yeah, so in terms of transitioning here, a little bit more going into that LSAT data score. So on the CAS report itself, you do have a legend that'll walk through those different codes that we would receive on the CAS report for the LSAT. Now with that, a common one that we will see can be that candidate cancel. And I know this is a bit small here, so I apologize. This will go ahead and be, let's say you do take it, the score is something that you're not too happy for, you can go ahead and you have that early preview, and you can decide to cancel that score. And so with that, if you did go ahead and retake it, you got a higher score, a score that you're pleased with, then when we receive the report, we'll see that it was attempted, but then ultimately that score was canceled, so we don't see that. And then the highest score, the score that the student does continue to pursue in terms of the application process. This P on this student, so this is when we look at the legend here, it will go ahead and be a cancel specifically for possession of electronic device. With that, a few thoughts initially. When we're taking a closer look here, it now lets us know that the student should, on the application, go ahead and disclose some of that information. So with that, you do have your personal statement, but you are able to also then submit an LSAT addendum. With that LSAT addendum, what we would consider in terms of kind of the proper process is, one, the student will submit that addendum explaining the situation. At times it can be very accidental of, I forgot I had my phone, or I forgot I had a smartwatch on. By the time I sat down to get started, they had told me that it was a device I couldn't have, and it gets canceled. And then other times it could be just the reality of something. Hey, I had my phone, I wanted to check the time, I had a timer on, somewhere where it was then potentially a little bit more malicious within intent. And from that point, we also then require to go ahead and submit any and all documentation from LSAC. So with that, they would submit you with an official letter. They'll go ahead and explain the situation, why you did receive that cancellation code. And so for this student specifically, when we take the application in, we are going to look for an LSAT addendum, as well as then official communication on the situation. If a student does not have any of those required pieces of that addendum or any of the communication, on our end, so for NSU Law specifically, we would then go ahead and put the application on hold and request those documents. And so with that, especially for these pieces that are going to be relatively serious, again, not disclosing then from our end, kind of initial raises the flag of, well, why aren't they disclosing that? But with it, so going through the process, especially now that we are reviewing the CAS report, thinking through the times that we are going to sit in LSAT, are there going to be specific codes? Again, the cancellation code, we always encourage students as well. That cancellation code, submit that addendum letting us know why you canceled it. It could be you've realized you weren't prepared, you took some time, and then again, we see the narrative build of, okay, well, they canceled, they took some time, and then now we do see a higher score. So with that, all of these little instances, we do kind of take a deeper dive and really kind of maybe a little fine-tooth comb of, well, why did they have that specific code? Why did they go ahead and, in Miss Yvonne's example, take it so many times? Those are all things that we are considering within the application process. With it, some of the other ones that you do see, it might be a test center violation, that security cancel, so it may be that they had to maybe potentially close if there was a kind of a in-person test taking, what that could look like for any security reasons. So those are going to be the ones that we commonly see. Also that A1, if it was you scheduled it, you realize, hey, the score that I had for February, I'm not going to need that April sit down, and it might be that you just forget, and then we do see on that application the delay or the absent. Again, at that point, if we are not receiving any of those addendums, any of the communications, we'll go ahead and we'll put an application on pause to make sure that we do have all of the information that will accurately represent your reality within the application. So those will go ahead and be that specific piece for the LSAT scores that we receive. Really quickly here as well, we will go ahead and just to point out on the letters of recommendation. So here on the right hand side, we do indicate on the application, it'll let us know how many letters of recommendation are within the CAS report that you've submitted. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, if you are currently enrolled or you've graduated and conferred a degree within the last 12 months, we will require an academic letter of recommendation. With it, we do see that there are, for this student, 3 already on file. The max you can submit via the CAS report is going to be 3. With it, and kind of that being said as well, while it is not going to be necessarily encouraged, or excuse me, it's not required if you do not have that graduation date within the last 12 months, for the academic letter of recommendation. It might be that a professor is someone that you said, I worked with them, they saw me at my lowest, and then really kind of pull myself back up academically. That might have been 5 years ago, but that may have more weight in your situation than maybe an employer saying, they are qualified, they are good. We see some very general ones at times. And so for you thinking through who those people will be, they are ultimately the stamp of approval for you when we are considering the student. And so those letters of recommendation do carry weight. And so again, while it might not be required to have an academic source if you've graduated past 12 months, then with that, we still certainly encourage you to be very concise with who you are really allowing to provide that recommendation for you. So again, if there are, let's say in this example, 3 that are going to be the max within the CAS report, with this example, let's say you have 3 from employers, but we do see if we scroll back up that the student is still enrolled through 2026. At that point, we are still requiring the student to submit that academic source for the letter of recommendation. And then from there, let's say they are 3 maxed. From there, you'd be able to work with our admissions team, and then typically sending that in via email, we're able to attach that to the application. So with that, while there are 3 max, again, certainly working with our applicants to make sure that is ultimately the best that we are providing for the committee there. Before moving on, Ms. Yvonne, any final thoughts before transitioning to the writing prompt?
No, but perhaps we could ask if any of the students have any questions about this CAS report or anything that we mentioned or failed to mention.
Hi, so I have a question that comes up with students. So sometimes students, I know you guys mentioned that you only see the first school, I think you said, in the CAS report. Can you explain that a bit more? Because sometimes we have students who they'll transition, like they'll complete a degree and then they'll start a different degree and then they'll realize they don't want to do that one anymore. And that's when they get interested in law and they become concerned that like that degree that they started is going to show up on the CAS report or they'll have to explain it in like an addendum or something.
If,
Um,
if they completed the first bachelor's and then start studying something else, their first bachelor's will show up on here.
mhm.
If they have not completed their first bachelor's, they start an area of study, stop, change in mid-gear, and the earlier grades are low, but then they finally find that match, right? That match made in heaven, and they do really well. We will see an upward trend then in the GPA, especially in that line that says cumulative across GPA. Then what we recommend they do is mention it, if not so much in the personal statement, because that's like your argument in front of the court, right? But you might do a supplement and you might entitle it major area of study or grades. And then you can tell us, because we're seeing numbers, but we don't see the story behind the numbers unless you tell us. So that's the distinction. And some people will say, you know, I started with a major. My parents had recommended that I study a particular discipline. I never liked it. I didn't feel comfortable with it. And then once I heard a professor, we had a guest speaker, and this professor came in and started speaking about another discipline. And I started taking courses, and my GPA increased, my grades increased. I was happier. Then that's information that you give us that we work along with the numbers. Okay, so that's how I would answer that. And remember, behind this sheet will be your actual transcript or transcripts. So here, University of Miami will have the full transcript showing all the grades, all the courses. St. Thomas University, those years that the person attended there from 2018 to 2020, that transcript will be there. And then Louisiana State, but that's the graduate. But the graduate is not part of this. It's always going to be your breakdown of your grades of your first degree. I hope that answered that.
It does. Thank you so much. And that's really helpful because it definitely comes up a lot. Thank you.
No, very good. And Ms. Yvonne, to that point of the transcripts, we'll I know we're moving on to the writer's prompt here, but I think just worth noting, we do, to her, Miss Yvonne's point, we do then have all the transcripts that are going to be attached. With this piece too, a few things that we always like to see. Within the admissions staff, certainly we will go ahead and take a closer look, making sure that any previous institutions maybe not on the CAS report are listed. So sometimes we have students that maybe you did a transient course, maybe you dual enrolled, and with that to your kind of recollection, to your knowledge, oh, that was either one class, it's on my official transcript. We require all transcripts. And so with that, at times we might see on here, for this example, if this student did not include their St. Thomas University transcript, we will then ultimately see that from the transcript of the degree or from the institutions. And so with it, in this example, the student has multiple institutions, and really it has that paper trail of all of the different institutions. Again, transient, it might be international, you did a study abroad, or just a dual enrollment, or even military transcripts, all of that we will require for the review there. But with it too, we're always able to see that story, kind of that narrative, while we do see the numbers ultimately. Then with that, to Ms. Yvonne's point, within the application, within some of those supplemental statements, you're really able to build that narrative for you and really tell that story of your application from the numbers that we have here. In terms of kind of moving forward and kind of going to the next piece of the CAS report that we receive, is going to be the writing prompt. I did switch tabs, and I just want to make sure, is this now we're looking at the writing prompt? Awesome, okay. And with this, I'm going to have Miss Yvonne help me a little bit more, kind of go into detail a little bit in terms of, from her experience, what we're looking for when we think of the writing prompts, what are some of the pieces we hope to take away from that. And so, Miss Yvonne, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more, and I'll be your hands here if you want to, once you're going down.
All right, thank you, Alex. First of all, the writing prompt, when they changed, and this changed a few years ago. It used to be maybe two people competing for a job or being a member of a sports team or for a scholarship. And they would say something about each of them, and they would have probably a couple of questions. And then you would begin writing to sort of answer those questions. They changed the whole format. So for you, it's new. So this is what you know. You don't know the old one unless you had taken older LSATs or LSATs some years back. Here, it's going to start with a topic. And there'll be a paragraph, sort of an introduction as to that topic, slow food movement. But here's an important thing, and I see a lot of students fail to remember that there's a key question. And so in their writing, they should be answering the question. Here, the key question relates to slow food movement. What values should inform the attitudes and practices surrounding food production and consumption? Now, that's a pretty general, broad question. But then what they're going to give you are perspectives. These are perspectives that are excerpts, either from a history book, a newspaper, an individual. And here, perspective one is an excerpt from a nonprofit newsletter on hunger reduction. Perspective two is an excerpt from an essay in a book on culinary history. Perspective three is an excerpt from an article in a food magazine. And perspective four is an excerpt from a marketing brochure for an urban garden collective. So what you have to do is read through those four perspectives. And they're going to give you a little bit of time to do this. And you're going to have a little space to kind of take notes, do a little outline, or take out some main points. Because you have to remember, keep that key question in mind as you're looking at the perspectives. And then part of this pre-writing analysis, I mean, I haven't even read, I'm not going to read you the perspectives, but that's going to take more time. But they're giving you time at the beginning. And now they want you to pre-write certain questions, some things that you pull out of these perspectives, because they want you to spend then the remainder of your pre-writing time. Remember, this is extra time given to you to prepare to write the prompt based on the prompt. And so they want you to start thinking critically. We, the recipients of this, the law schools who are reading this, we want to see whether you have what we call lawyering skills. You don't learn them in law school. You come to the admissions place with them. So you have an opportunity to show them off how well you think, how critical is your reading of what's in front of you and analyzing about the issue. Don't forget the question. And then generate productive ideas utilizing some of the perspectives. So out of those perspectives, there might be one that really speaks to you about that topic. So one of the bullets said, which perspective do you find the most compelling? And then what relevant insights do you see in that perspective? So now it's your opportunity to kind of reflect, analyze, and think critically about that. And then what principles or values do you see at work in that perspective? Or you might choose two of the perspectives, or three, or all four of them. And then what strengths and weaknesses can you find in that perspective to support your belief in answering that key question? And then finally, those three bullets at the end, your argument should incorporate or address ideas from at least one of those perspectives. Some people miss that completely. They read it and then they go off on their own and they never refer back. And remember, in law, that's what we're going to be doing. We're looking at cases that are going to support our current case at that moment. Anything we make, any statement that we make has to be supported by evidence. You're doing the same thing here. So the knowledge that you already have about the issue, you might be involved in this particular issue. So you can use your own knowledge, your own experiences, your own values regarding that topic. And again, remember the key question. You probably have forgotten it. So Alex, if we can scroll up. What values should inform the attitudes and practices surrounding food production and consumption? And then you begin, when that time runs out, they let you keep that little box where you've entered your notes. And then you begin to write when they say, okay, the prep time is over, get ready and begin. And then you begin to write. So this is going to be an important part because we're going to see how you write under pressure. You know, we know that there'll be misspellings. We know that the grammar might not be great, but did you spot the issue? Did you answer the question? And what analysis did you use to arrive at what you're writing about, what that draft is about? And guess what? We're going to compare this under time. We're going to compare it to your personal statement that you had time to prepare, and maybe AI helped you a little bit along the way. Remember, here you can't have any tools. You can't have any resources. You can't have your phone or your watch or, that kind of thing. Otherwise, you're going to get that P. And that can be character and fitness. It could deal with honesty. So you have to be careful. So this is kind of what the writing prompt, you see it's going to take a lot of time. So how do I prepare for something like this? Make sure you read what's asked of you. Make a little note, reminder, answer the key questions somewhere in what you are producing and what you're going to be submitting. And then utilize the perspectives to support and utilize your own experience. If you have experience, knowledge on this topic, and then you can interweave both. Okay, Alex, I'll hand it back to you. And
Sure. No, great. And that was kind of those last pieces there, considering all of those pre-writing questions. So, Ms. Yvonne, thank you so much for that piece. And again, kind of walking through in terms of the progression that we do see in terms of kind of first that cover page, really diving deep into that. From there, those transcripts are also a key piece there. And of course, that writing prompt that Ms. Yvonne just kind of walked us through, then really taking a kind of a deeper dive into the response there. But with the little time that we have left, just being aware of our time as well, really want to take a closer look at an example. We kind of zoomed by a little bit, but did want to go back to an example where we do see academic action within a student's background piece for the notes from transcript. So we had touched on an example earlier that showed just the student who had academic honors. They had of kind of one of the, maybe they were on dean's list. You will see that or president's list. But this one says academic action. And so for us that are going to be, again, the recipient and reviewing this, immediately a few things come to mind is that more times than not, academic action is going to be probation, warning, or maybe even dismissal. And so that'll go ahead and indicate to us that the student somewhere on their academic record now has an academic action. For us, and for you as a student, if you are reviewing your own CAS report, we do see that for this student specifically that had academic action, that code will tell us the school and then ultimately that year. So when did that academic action happen on a transcript? And then so from us, again, just kind of some of those different codes, we do see that this SIT 5206 is going to be from their time at Florida International. So they went to FIU, and at some point during that, they did have academic action. And then again, utilizing everything that we've covered, if we're going to go back here, where we do have all of those institutions listed, we can see 502 or 5206 within those 2 years. So we're going to be looking at within maybe a little bit of this, and then ultimately we see, well, that 5206 is going to be FIU. And so I know that now I'm going to the FIU transcript and taking a closer look at these semesters for that academic action. And then so as Ms. Yvonne had mentioned earlier, when we're going through the CAS report, all of those transcripts are going to be a part of that that we review. So when we scroll, let's see, there we go. So when we scroll through here, so this is now the transcript that we would be reviewing. From here, we understand and we know that they do have some transfer credits. So we did see Broward College on there. And if we were to go into that kind of 2016, we do see that it's not going to be within here, but rather it is going to be within their FIU transcript. And so as we continue to go into the transcript, kind of that first piece, we do see that fall 16 semester, we do start to see some of those grades maybe dip a little bit. And then so immediately for us, at the end of the semester, we now see that the student did have an academic warning. And so from here, as soon as we do see the academic warning, for us, again, just a quick kind of either check mark or flag that now we need to review on our end the application under the character and fitness. Did they disclose that? And so from here, we do see that it does continue for this student. They now would then be on academic probation. So we see that for this student, a kind of a progression, a bit of a downward trend. We were talking about the trends and some of that data earlier. And so what we do see then is for us, one already indicated within the CAS report on that cover page, but then two, we can go in and then now confirm those specific semesters. Part of the application process is going to be the character and fitness. And so within that character and fitness, it is a student's opportunity to disclose all of these pieces, so whether we're thinking of academic as well as criminal action as well. And then so for us, now that we do see and have this on the student's transcript, we would then go on to the application. And then from here, I have just kind of an excerpt from an application for this student. Under the character and fitness section, so it is going to go through some of the disclosure agreements of, the reality is part of the process is legally disclosing that information. And then so from us, for this student specifically, they went ahead and they've indicated yes, that during any time within their academic history, did they have probation, whether warning or equivalent for that. In the event that the student does not go ahead and indicate yes, but we see on the transcript, again, kind of as we mentioned earlier, at that point the application is placed on hold. And then with that, we will work with the student to make sure, hey, you said no to this, but actually on your record it does indicate that we do have that. And then from there, we would need similarly academic, for academic action, any official communication from your institution if you were put on probation, the terms of the probation, and then ultimately the release from that probation. But then also, again, your statement. So at that point, we do require that character and fitness statement. And that will be your opportunity to walk through the realities of, Miss Yvonne said earlier, life happens, and we get that. And so for that, allowing yourself to explain these semesters I was going through with my family, I had this XYZ that went ahead and led to a poor performance. But then with that, also a great way to then, if we do see an upward trend past that, then again, being able to, despite or in spite of some of these pieces that have happened and transpired, we do now see that academic record continue to go up. And so with that, again, when a student does disclose that, we do have that indicated here. So when you are thinking of applying to NOVA under the character and fitness, making sure that you are indicating yes to some of that information. And then we do have other options here. So again, the character and fitness is academic as well as criminal. And then so you will have some of those other options here as well. Within the character and fitness, again, it does go through just the realities of having it be legally required to disclose. If you do have any previous cases, any pending cases, open cases that might be criminal, or even just the realities of, we've had students say, hey, my first semester I was on campus housing. I had too many people in my dorm, and I was placed on a probation, or I was just served with a citation. All of that, same thing. We will need to have that disclosed. The reality of potentially having like alcohol within your dorm and receiving any form of citation for that. Similarly, we do require all of that information to be disclosed. I know we're just at 10 minutes, and with that, I'm sure we've also thrown a lot at you. Before kind of transitioning to the end, Ms. Yvonne, any final thoughts? I know we covered a lot here for the students, but also want to make sure I know that with your experience and expertise, that we're not leaving anything from the students.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. On this character and fitness, these words, these questions come from the Florida bar examiners. And so if you are going to practice law in Florida, before you become a member of the bar or take the bar exam for that matter, you have to fill out similar questions. And guess what? They're going to request your application from the law school or law schools you've applied to. And so they're going to look at some of these responses, how you responded when you were in law school and how you respond now that you've completed law school and applying for the bar. So this is very serious stuff. And we want to make sure that you are not only academically fit for law school, but your character and fitness. And finally, if you have a criminal charge against you, if you are on probation, you cannot apply to law school until your probationary period is completed. And everything that you might say yes to requires documentation from the court, from the school, from an institution, as well as from you, the detail as to what occurred. We find that a lot of students don't give enough details. They may say, yes, I got in trouble with the law, but since then I've been fine. They haven't told us anything. So remember, you're going to be a lawyer representing individuals. We have to see that kind of writing, detail, supporting what happened. And then you have to let the law school know as much about what occurred and leave that information in the hands of the faculty admissions review or whoever is reviewing. So those are the main things, but I saw that there was a question or a comment there.
I think we're also, I pulled up the chat, and that was Priya, just to be able to get some thoughts as we wrap up. But in terms of kind of some final thoughts, so I know that we, again, reviewed a lot really quickly. With the goal of our time today and reviewing some of this information for you folks is really getting a better understanding of what are we looking at, what are some of the areas that when us as an admissions staff take a closer look at the report, what are some of the things that we're immediately drawn to, but then also what is the information, what is this data telling us? And so with that, piecing that with your application, really starting to think through for you when we go through this. Okay, maybe I did have a bad semester. Maybe I will need to go ahead and include that. Maybe there is going to be some transcripts that I haven't thought of that I need to make sure that I submit. And so the goal for today, really starting to think through a lot of the realities when we are reviewing, but for you as well, some of those pieces that must be included as well as disclosed for that. In terms of then kind of next steps and really as we start thinking through just the end for us, did want to also just include just how to contact us. The reality is, again, this was a lot of information, but two, you might be at that next step of, okay, Alex, I'm ready to start applying. Miss Yvonne, you mentioned this, and kind of I want to maybe piggyback a little bit and get some additional thoughts. And so did want to have this here for us. This is going to be our contact page. We'll go ahead and make sure Priya also send this to you, so if any of the students want this cover page, that you can go ahead and have that sent to them.
Thank you.
But from here, I always like to say, being a private institution, we are a small office, and I think that is absolutely to the benefit of the student. It's not going to be an AI system reading applications. It's not going to be a bot that is going to be picking up the phone. But when you call us, myself, Tamilia, Miss Yvonne, Miss Tanya, they are the ones answering the phones. When you email that law admissions email, that comes to us directly. Our goal ultimately is, yes, we want the best students, and we also want to make sure that you have the best application to put in front of our committee. And so if you do have any questions, any thoughts after today, do want to go ahead and make sure that you can reach us. And we're just at 5 minutes, and so didn't know, and kind of opening it up, Priya, any final thoughts or maybe any questions from the students that we can answer here before we're done for the day?
So students, feel free to put your questions in the chat or unmute now if you'd like, so they can answer your questions. In the meantime, just thinking generally about like the questions we have from students a lot. So I think a lot of students are really concerned normally about the LSAT and how many times to take it. And I know Yvonne was touching on it earlier that like 2 times is probably a good amount. If a student, is there like a specific set of points that you think it could be worth it to retake the LSAT score if students are practicing and they're getting like a higher range? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, that goes back to what you know about yourself, right? Some people know, like somebody told me, I took it the first 3 times. I really was just taking it. I wasn't really preparing. And by the way, you need to prepare at least 3 months in advance of the exam. So when you're looking at the dates that the exam is going to be offered, look at the 3 months before that. So if you're looking at, oh, I'm going to take the exam in May, then the months of April, March, and February. But what's going on in your life? You might be taking midterms. You might be working on a paper. So you always have to take that responsibility for yourself. Do not, when in doubt, check it out. Don't take the exam because you paid for it. That's another one. I didn't have time to prepare, but I already paid for it. Well, then maybe there's a way, if you're thinking like a lawyer, you should have those lawyering skills if you're applying to law school, that you would ask LSAC to put that money towards another exam date versus the date that you have down. You got to think like a problem solver. That's what we as lawyers do. So you have to know yourself. And that person who said, I took it 3 times, I wasn't serious, now I am. I've raised my grades. I'm now focused. I'm taking a prep course, and that's important, folks. LSAT exam is not an IQ test. You have to learn how to take this. And then remember, as Alex showed on the CAS report, you're compared against the people from your undergraduate school who have sat for the LSAT. He showed you the numbers, the LSAT GPA ranges for our school. Those are the numbers of the current first-year class. When they came in August of 2025, those were the 25th, 50th, and 75th percent reflecting that group. And then when you take the LSAT, you have the 3-digit score and a percentile. That compares you to everyone nationwide in Canada who sat the day that you sat for the exam. So to answer that question, that's when you have to have self-knowledge. Am I serious about this? And then do I have the time to prepare without causing jeopardy to my current GPA? I don't want to drop in my grades, especially as I'm going towards my graduation semester. So that's going to be a personal. And if you need to take it 4 times, that's a decision you have to make intentionally and with preparation. That's the only thing I can say about that. And then you write about it. You tell us what those four exams meant, how you prepared, and why that last one is your strongest score, what you did differently, and that you have become that person. And that's the person who's applying to the law school.
Thank you
That's
so
the
much.
that's the
Thank you
best I
so
can.
much, Siobhan. That answers it really well. Going off of that, I think we had a question in the chat the students were asking. So in viewing the GPA from the CAS report, is there ever a comparison between the LSAC GPA and the undergrad institution listed GPA or GPAs?
The LSAC is going to make a determination based on a formula they use. So that means that the GPA that shows up on the CAS report might be a little lower than the actual GPA you got on your transcript. Members of the faculty admissions committee will read both. They'll see what the CAS report indicates, and then they will look at your actual transcript. But remember, it's the cumulative. So if you attended more than one school, the two GPAs will be different on the CAS report. I don't know, Alex, if you can go back to that cover page of or any CAS cover so that people can see there's going to be two places for a GPA. One is going to be the school that you're graduating from, that CAS GPA, and then there's going to be the cumulative if you attended more than one school. So there at the bottom, right, undergraduate summary, degree summary, GPA. Degree doesn't mean poli-sci in this case. It means a degree granting school. University of Miami. That was the GPA. But the person also attended Florida State and St. Thomas, and St. Thomas kicked them off with a very lower GPA. So that pulled the cum down. Now, it could work the opposite way. If your earlier grades were really, really strong, and then the degree granting school where you graduate from, you scored a little lower, your cum is going to be higher because you have those earlier grades. So that's one of the distinctions here. But there is, as you had mentioned, there is another distinction because if a school is not as rigorous, University of Miami is a 156, which is above the median of test takers nationwide. And so they know that that school is a little bit more rigorous. So that GPA might be lower on the LSAC CAS report than actually on the transcript. But the committee members look at that.
Thank you. And then we had another question as well. Um, so a student was asking if they have a 3.4 GPA, they know that's considered pretty low generally. Would a high LSAT score help them to get accepted into a good program in
That's
their
a great question. Alex, do you have some thoughts on those splitters, high LSAT, lower GPA, or the other way around?
Yeah, I think when we take or when we see those applicants, I think for NSU specifically, it is a holistic application, and so with that, we are. I mentioned a little bit earlier, of course, LSAT and GPA is the eye candy, but ultimately there's so many other components to the application that round out the student that we are considering. There is ultimately the point of the comparative piece, and so we've mentioned that several times of when we do have a student that we do come in for the application process. If there are going to be students when we start thinking of within that LSAT range, some of those GPA ranges, we're then ultimately then also going to be comparing you to students within that application. And so maybe a general answer, but the review process is ultimately holistic. And so we do have students that will then go ahead and we have maybe good test takers, and then potentially maybe just the being in a classroom setting that might be a little bit more difficult, or vice versa. We have maybe a really high GPA with then potentially lower LSAT scores. With that, again, then that's when we do consider the holistic application, the full application, to really make that consideration. And Miss Yvonne, I didn't know. Again, I always lean back to that experience, especially being at some different institutions as well, and maybe some of the different processes that you've experienced there.
Yeah, and the other thing, when there's a splitter, maybe you might not get admitted, but maybe you might not get denied either. You might be waitlisted. And then, since, as Alex said, it's competitive and comparative, you're compared against others. And folks, this is right now a law school admission cycle year. That means we're getting so many applications that the law schools can be very picky and very choosy. When it becomes a student or an applicant cycle, that means there aren't that many of you applying. Now the schools are going to be less strict. Why? Because there's less people to do that comparison. The other thing is, when you apply earlier in the cycle, our applications become available September 1st. If you apply anytime between then and Thanksgiving, you're at the beginning of the pool. Seats are available, scholarship money is available. If you go after that into the new calendar year, there's going to be a lot of files in front of you and a lot of money may be offered already. So you're kind of at a deficit in the back of the pack. So you have to make all of those kinds of determinations for yourself. And you know, good luck. Congratulations, first of all, for being here, because you now know things that a lot of people won't know, people you're competing against. So be intentional in your application. See what it is you need to do to strengthen your grades, because once you graduate, that door is shut. And those grades are there forever. You could always, change your LSAT a little bit, but it can change downward as well. So those are things that we want you to think about this. Don't just fill out an application. Don't just hand in a personal statement. Don't just hand in a resume and just ask specific people for letters of recommendation. Put it together. Be intentional as to what you want your file to look like and what you want the members of the Faculty Admissions Committee to have in front of them to review. And we're well past our time.
But you're giving such great information. Thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I know for the students who couldn't make it, we post this to YouTube, and I know people will definitely be watching this to trying to get the information as well. So thank you both so much for being here. Students, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to them. They put their email in the chat as well, lawadmissions@nova.edu with the dash in the middle. And students, you can also feel free to reach out to us as well. And thank you both again for being here. This was so helpful. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you so much for the opportunity. And to Priya's point, any thoughts, any other questions, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help.